The moment I realized I was being erased from the equation was subtle. An offhand comment in a meeting, a glance that lingered too long, a name missing from an email thread. But it confirmed what I already suspected. I was no longer indispensable. For 7 years I had been the backbone of Meridian Solutions field operations, the unseen force behind a revenue climb from $450,000 to nearly $1.8 million annually. I managed a portfolio of 53 clients, each relationship meticulously cultivated, each workflow optimized under my watch. My creation, the Field Ops system, was a proprietary framework I'd developed piece by piece, a silent engine running the company's client engagement strategy. No one else held the depth of knowledge I commanded over these processes. Still, in the conference room this morning, when Chandler Williams, my VP and former mentor, glanced my way without acknowledgement, the message was clear. My role was shrinking. I sat still, expression neutral, as Chandler opened the floor for strategic discussions. My input was barely solicited, and when it was met with polite but dismissive nods. The room felt colder, the air thicker with unspoken shift in power dynamics. I recorded the meeting, not out of distrust but discipline. Every conversation logged, every decision traceable. My job was to maintain operational excellence, but now I was also tasked with safeguarding my own professional relevance. I knew what I brought to the table was vital. The proprietary Field Ops system alone controlled by me, the relationships I had built from the ground up, and the protocols I'd tailored to reduce client churn by 12% year over year. Yet, Chandler's growing distance was a silent indictment of my value, and the tension was palpable beneath the polished corporate veneer. I smiled on the outside, but inside I was recalculating, preparing for the inevitable friction ahead. The complexity of Meridian Solutions' hierarchy was never a surprise. Chandler, as Vice President of Operations, wielded significant influence over my division. When I joined 7 years ago as a promising operations analyst, his mentorship felt genuine. He saw potential in my methodical approach to client management and operational efficiency. We built a working relationship based on mutual respect and shared goals. But that dynamic shifted abruptly 4 months ago, when Chandler's daughter, Rachel Williams, joined the company fresh out of college. Rachel's resume was thin, her experience non-existent, yet her presence in meetings and client discussions grew exponentially. Unannounced schedule changes and bypassed protocols began to erode my authority. I remember the day she showed up uninvited to a client meeting in Chicago, sitting confidently at the table as if she'd earned her seat. Chandler's response was a vague, dismissive, "Family comes first, Adam." It was a statement loaded with insinuation, a clear signal that merit was no longer the guiding principle here. The company culture tolerated this nepotism, prioritizing loyalty over performance, and I was forced to adapt or be sidelined. I documented these incidents meticulously, noting every irregularity in my personal logs. There was the time Rachel interjected during a strategy call with a key client without my knowledge. I alerted Chandler privately, only to receive a non-committal reassurance that Rachel's presence will provide fresh perspective. The phrase echoed in my mind, sour and hollow. The growing dissonance between Chandler's public friendliness and his private undermining was unmistakable. I found myself rationalizing the tensions as the inevitable turbulence of Q4 and corporate restructuring. Yet beneath that rationalization was a simmering awareness that the ground beneath me was shifting, and the man who once championed my growth was now quietly orchestrating my marginalization. Despite this, I maintained strict professional composure, knowing any overt reaction would only confirm their narrative of me as resistant to change. My ownership of the Field Ops system was my greatest leverage, though I kept it guarded and purposefully underutilized as a silent reserve. I had designed the client engagement algorithm and customized service workflows that were licensed exclusively to Meridian Solutions, but contractually owned by me. The entire business depended on this system and on me to operate it. 47 of the 53 clients under my portfolio had been personally brought in and nurtured through years of painstaking relationship management. Each contract explicitly named me as the primary account manager, and none of these clients had direct contact with Chandler or Rachel. My documentation, the intellectual property, client agreements, pricing models, was kept offline and secure. outside the reach of Meridian's standard databases. Jennifer Lee, the senior account executive, was my trusted liaison. She supported my client management strategies and was discreet with sensitive operational details. Thomas Brooks, a former analyst, occasionally provided me with operational insights, though he remained cautious. Together, we formed a quiet network that maintained Meridian's field operations integrity, even as internal politics threatened to unravel it. The crucial pivot came when my quarterly bonus, a historically steady $15,000, was slashed by 40%. The justification was a memo from Chandler crediting Rachel with client acquisition on 2 major deals totaling $320,000 in annual revenue. The internal communication bizarrely attributed success to Rachel's involvement, despite her negligible role. Jennifer and 2 account representatives confirmed in separate conversations that I had led these deals from inception to closing. I responded with a formal email to HR and Chandler, disputing the reduction and attaching client emails and documented proof of my leadership. Chandler's reply was cold and dismissive, emphasizing the need for fresh perspectives and implying my methods were outdated. It was a calculated move to undermine not only my financial rewards, but my reputation. I recorded the exchange and catalogued the incident carefully. The immediate financial setback stung, but more damaging was the public erasure of my contribution. For now I accepted the excuse outwardly, but inside I was planting seeds of doubt, sharpening my vigilance for the battles that lay ahead. The first unmistakable shock came with the restructuring order. Without any prior discussion or notification, Chandler reallocated 2 of my most senior account representatives to Rachel's division. I learned about it only when a terse email landed in my inbox from HR, citing strategic realignment as the justification. The message was clinical, void of any rationale that included my input. Those 2 team members had been integral to managing high-value clients who trusted me implicitly. Their reassignment was a blow aimed not just at resources, but at my influence. I immediately started cross-referencing meeting minutes and internal calendars, confirming that I was systematically excluded from key strategic planning sessions linked directly to our field operations. The pattern was deliberate. Rumors began to circulate, as if seeded by invisible hands. Phrases like resistant to innovation and blocking leadership's vision surfaced quietly in side conversations with colleagues. It was subtle but effective. Colleagues I once collaborated with began to distance themselves, hesitant to challenge Chandler's narrative. Jennifer, once the most reliable ally, started to visibly pull back during meetings, her support now confined to subdued nods rather than constructive engagement. Privately, she assured me of her loyalty, but the atmosphere of coercion was undeniable. I made it a priority to log every interaction, every alteration to team structure, minutes of meetings from which I was excluded, and every whisper of the damaging rumors. There was no room for emotional outbursts. Maintaining composure was the only way to keep control. Chandler escalated matters further by formalizing a performance review centered on my so-called client growth plateau. It was a thinly veiled pretext, with the underlying message praising Rachel's potential and framing her as the future of the division. This narrative was carefully crafted and discreetly fed to HR and senior management. I knew this because the HR liaison, under subtle pressure, began to delay responses to my inquiries and dismissed my documentation as insufficient, relying on Chandler's word as gospel. The performance review was a tool to legitimize the sidelining, creating an official record that would justify future decisions against me. I analyzed the language used, noting how phrases were deliberately ambiguous to avoid direct accusations, yet damaging enough to erode my credibility. Despite growing isolation and increasing bureaucratic obstacles, my approach remained strategic. I refrained from confrontation, focusing instead on meticulous documentation. Email trails, changes in team composition, the absence of invitations to meetings, and the sudden shift in performance metrics. I anticipated that this growing dossier would be key leverage in any future dispute or negotiation. The gaslighting was insidious, designed to undermine my sense of reality and fracture my support network within the company, but I refused to be shaken. I understood the power of timing and evidence. The moment to act decisively had not yet arrived, but the groundwork was being laid meticulously. Each day, I reviewed my logged evidence, cross-referencing timelines and communications to ensure accuracy. I maintained a detached perspective, analyzing Chandler's moves as calculated chess plays rather than personal slights. The atmosphere within Field Ops was tense, but outwardly professional. A silent war waged with corporate vernacular and administrative maneuvers. I recognized the necessity to appear unflappable, to deny Chandler the satisfaction of visible frustration. With every exclusion and whispered slight, I strengthened my resolve, preparing for the next phase of engagement, knowing that patience and precision were my greatest assets in this battle. I submitted a formal complaint to Meridian's HR and compliance departments, attaching a comprehensive timeline, supporting email threads, client contracts, and detailed bonus calculations. My request was clear: mediation and a review of both the promotion and bonus decisions, emphasizing internal policies explicitly forbidding nepotism without merit. I referenced the company handbook section, outlining governance and disclosure requirements for familial promotions, highlighting Chandler's failure to notify the board. I was meticulous, ensuring no ambiguity in the documentation I provided. Yet, despite the weight of evidence, the response was frustratingly slow and vague. HR's replies were boilerplate, evasive, and deferred responsibility, signaling Chandler's grip on senior management and internal processes. Trawling through company policy, I discovered that any family-related promotion required formal disclosure to the board of directors, an essential transparency measure. Chandler's circumvention of this step was a clear breach. However, the policies also contained ambiguous clauses granting leadership discretion, a loophole that Chandler exploited with impunity. Informal political alliances within the upper echelons shielded him further, creating an environment where accountability was diluted by deference to hierarchy. I realized the internal channels were compromised, not through legal violations alone, but through entrenched power dynamics immune to procedural checks. My complaint was effectively stalled, caught in a bureaucratic limbo designed to protect senior management interests. Though the system was failing me, I continued compiling evidence, knowing that a thorough record was vital if I were to pursue justice through alternative means. I reviewed every conversation, every altered document, every marginalizing email, cataloging them meticulously. The silence from HR underscored a painful reality. The institution was not neutral, but an extension of Chandler's influence. I maintained a clinical detachment, suppressing frustration and disappointment, focusing instead on the strategic implications. The battlefront had shifted. I could no longer rely solely on internal mechanisms, but I would not relinquish my position without exhaustive documentation and calculated patience. The situation deteriorated sharply when Chandler issued a directive freezing my planned 15% salary increase indefinitely. This raise, tied to my tenure and consistent performance over 7 years, represented approximately $27,000 annually. The freeze was abrupt, communicated via an impersonal HR notice citing budgetary constraints that coincided suspiciously with Chandler's growing control. Simultaneously, a $450,000 client project I had secured was reassigned to Rachel with no explanation. The reassignment was announced in passing during a divisional meeting. No rationale was provided, and my objections were dismissed as distractions. These moves inflicted tangible financial damage, directly impacting my family's plans. Vacations were cancelled, and the timeline for saving a down payment on our home extended indefinitely. Senior management quietly took note of the unfair treatment, but remained silent, wary of antagonizing Chandler. The fear of reprisal was palpable. His influence permeated decision-making layers, and colleagues calculated self-preservation over support. Meanwhile, Chandler's private insinuations in meetings subtly undermined my reputation, painting me as unadaptable and resistant to change despite my proven track record. The cumulative effect was devastating. Lost raises, withheld bonuses, reassigned projects, these combined losses approached $200,000. I tracked each figure scrupulously, aware that this concrete data would be pivotal in exposing the extent of the financial and professional damage inflicted upon me. Yet, outwardly, I maintained unwavering control, refusing to reveal the personal toll beneath the corporate facade. Each morning, I reviewed budgets and forecasts, noting how these punitive measures disrupted not only my income, but also client deliverables and operational efficiency. The strain was a constant silent pressure on my personal life, forcing difficult conversations with my spouse about financial priorities and long-term security. Still, I avoided letting these realities interfere with my strategic mindset. I analyzed Chandler's moves dispassionately, cataloging the damage while planning potential responses. This was no longer a battle for recognition. It was a fight for professional survival. I remained vigilant, a quiet force beneath the surface, biding time and gathering ammunition. In a final formal effort, I drafted a comprehensive letter to Meridian's board of directors. It outlined the nepotism violations, detailed financial impacts, and breaches of corporate policy, with exhaustive documentation and corroborating client testimonials. The letter requested an independent audit of Chandler's decisions and Rachel's accelerated promotion. I arranged a meeting with the CEO to present my case personally, prepared with data and strategic arguments. However, the CEO deflected responsibility, referring me back to HR, a department already compromised by Chandler's sway. This circular deflection signaled that formal avenues were exhausted. Chandler responded by increasing administrative burdens, mandatory weekly reports, restrictions on client communication, and added bureaucratic checkpoints designed to sap my operational effectiveness. I recognized the pattern clearly. Each attempt at reconciliation or accountability was met with escalating control and resistance. I stated my needs explicitly in a follow-up meeting: transparency, fair evaluation, and restoration of operational autonomy. Chandler rejected these calmly, his cold dismissal devoid of justification beyond vague references to leadership priorities. The message was clear: my role was diminished by design, and cooperation would not reverse it. Despite this, I maintained a composed demeanor, documenting every interaction with precision. The failure of official mechanisms forced me to acknowledge a harsh truth. If the system refused justice, I would need to devise alternative strategies to protect my professional integrity and value within Meridian Solutions. I left the CEO's office with a clear understanding of the stakes. The institutional inertia and Chandler's entrenched influence rendered internal remediation ineffective. The administrative burdens intensified, but so did my resolve. I was no longer negotiating for recognition within the existing framework. I was preparing for a strategic recalibration. My documentation became a weapon, my operational expertise a bargaining chip. The silent war for my career was entering a new phase, one where patience, precision, and calculated action would determine the outcome. Emotion was a luxury I could not afford. Only cold competence and unyielding focus remained. The demotion came swiftly after my appeal to the board. No fanfare, no negotiation. My title was stripped down to a nominal advisory role. Officially, I was still part of Meridian Solutions, but my client access privileges were slashed by 20%, a calculated move to sever my direct influence. My office was relocated to a remote floor, far from the core operational teams, a sterile space devoid of the familiar hum of collaboration. The isolation cut deeper than the physical distance. It was a signal to the company that I was no longer a player in the game. Colleagues who once exchanged professional nods avoided eye contact or passed me with forced smiles, fearful that association might jeopardize their own standing. The whispers began. Questions about my competence floated in hallways, thinly veiled as concern, but clearly orchestrated to erode my credibility. The financial squeeze tightened simultaneously. Bonuses were withheld without explanation, salary increases frozen indefinitely, although cost of living adjustments quietly inflated living expenses. I balanced the mounting economic pressure against the dwindling professional support, aware that finances were as much a weapon as any corporate memo. Yet I resisted the temptation to react emotionally. Instead, I channeled frustration into cold calculation. Each slight, each exclusion was logged meticulously. Dates, times, participants, and exact wording recorded. I preserved every email thread, every altered document, every subtle shift in client assignments. This was not merely a defensive posture. It was the foundation of a strategic counteroffensive. The battlefield was clear. Chandler wielded nepotism and influence to dismantle my authority, but I was far from defeated. This period of enforced solitude forced a reassessment. Without the noise of daily meetings or the usual client interactions, I gained a detached clarity. The absence of familiar faces amplified the internal countdown of my options. I analyzed Chandler's moves with clinical precision, identifying patterns of escalation, first economic, then operational, then personal. This was no random corporate reshuffle. It was a campaign of attrition designed to break me. The realization sharpened my resolve. The more isolated I became, the more I understood the necessity of patience and timing. The war was no longer about proving competence. It was about survival and reclamation. I was cataloging data, not just for documentation, but to craft a blueprint for retaliation. The pressure was immense, but beneath it, a quiet steel was hardening. By the second week in the remote office, I noticed the subtle shifts in communication frequency. Invitations to strategic meetings ceased entirely. Requests for updates on key projects were increasingly filtered through intermediaries, diluting my voice. Even Jennifer, whose loyalty remained unspoken yet tangible, was constrained in her outreach. I could sense the invisible barriers settling around me, a containment strategy with no declared end. Still, I maintained a consistent output, reports delivered on schedule, responses prompt but measured. I refused to provide Chandler any leverage through erratic behavior or visible frustration. This composure was a strategic asset, a demonstration that despite the deprivation, I retained control over my professional demeanor. The moment for a decisive move had not arrived, but the pieces were aligning for what was to come. Late one evening, after the office emptied, I reviewed the growing dossier of retaliation tactics. The layering of administrative obstacles, financial penalties, and social isolation painted a comprehensive picture of Chandler's assault. Yet paradoxically, the clarity of his strategy illuminated my path forward. The battle lines were drawn sharply, no longer muddled by uncertainty. My isolation was not defeat, but a crucible forging the tactical mind I needed to outmaneuver him. The weight of solitude was heavy, but it forced me to sharpen my focus, to anticipate moves beyond the visible. Despite the losses, the controlled frustration simmered into steely determination. I was not just cataloging damage, I was preparing for a strategic return. Friday afternoon arrived with a final blow that landed like a punch to the gut. The termination letter was terse, clinical, effective immediately, it read, citing organizational restructuring as the cause. The phrase was a thin veil over Chandler's orchestration. The enclosed performance deficiency report, authored solely by him, was riddled with distortions and outright fabrications. I scanned the document with cold detachment, noting how he twisted facts and omitted context to construct a narrative justifying my removal. The financial implications struck hard. I had lost direct control over $1.6 million in annual client revenue, nearly 90% of my portfolio. Years of relationship building, trust, and operational mastery wiped out with a few paragraphs. It was more than a professional setback. It was the erasure of my legacy. The severity of the situation demanded swift investigation. I dug into Meridian's internal records and uncovered evidence of a parallel company secretly registered by Chandler, with Rachel as a co-owner. This entity was soliciting my clients under Meridian's name, a blatant violation of fiduciary duties and non-compete clauses. The scope of this conspiracy was staggering, a premeditated plan to consolidate control within Chandler's family by systematically dismantling my influence. The betrayal was not just professional but fundamental. It revealed a deliberate effort to appropriate my work and my clients. The cold reality was that my position had been undermined from within, not through legitimate competition, but through deception and manipulation. Despite the devastation, I maintained a clinical mindset. Emotional responses were counterproductive. Clarity demanded objectivity. I mapped out the tactical consequences: the lost revenue, the legal breaches, the erosion of client relationships. But I also recognized the leverage points: exclusive contracts with non-transferable clauses, documented proof of Chandler's misconduct, and the parallel company's illegitimacy. My role as a senior operations manager endowed me with intimate knowledge of these assets, and I resolved to deploy them with precision. The betrayal had shattered illusions. but it also stripped away ambiguity. Chandler's hand was visible, and so was my path forward. The termination was not the end. It was the catalyst for a calculated reclamation. In the quiet aftermath of termination, I immersed myself in a methodical audit of every asset and piece of evidence within my grasp. The exclusive client contracts, embedded with non-transferable clauses, became a foundation for leverage. My proprietary field ops intellectual property, a culmination of years of development and refinement, was mine by original creation and distinct from Meridian's claims. I catalogued every instance of Chandler's violations, nepotism policies ignored, employment contracts breached. This was not a matter of grievance, but of documented fact. To validate my findings, I engaged Mark Reynolds, a seasoned employment lawyer with a reputation for dissecting corporate malfeasance. His confirmation of Meridian's liability added critical weight, transforming my dossier from internal record into potential legal weapon. Parallel to legal validation, I identified potential allies whose disenchantment with Chandler's leadership was palpable. Jennifer Lee, despite her cautious approach, remained a steadfast confidant. Several account executives, sidelined and frustrated by the nepotistic shift, expressed quiet solidarity. Even clients, disillusioned by the decline in service quality under Rachel's management, were compiled into a list, individuals who would support my narrative if approached strategically. This web of support was delicate but promising, a network of influence that could be mobilized with care. I began drafting a multi-phase strategy: legal action designed to expose and penalize Meridian's breaches, controlled communication with clients to preserve trust, and a systematic withdrawal of my portfolio to pressure Meridian operationally. The plan required precision and patience, but held a high probability of success if executed flawlessly. The emotional residue of betrayal simmered beneath the surface, but never clouded my tactical clarity. Processing the magnitude of deception was necessary, but dwelling on it was a luxury I could not afford. Instead, I channeled the emerging anger into resolve. This would never happen again. The awakening was not sudden, but a gradual crystallization of purpose. I refused to be a casualty of Chandler's machinations. The calculated collection of evidence and alignment of allies was the foundation. The next step was decisive action. I would dismantle the false narrative with facts, legal authority, and strategic communication. The stakes were immense: my career, reputation, and livelihood. But so was my capacity for cold, strategic response. The line was drawn. This was no longer a fight for survival, but for restoration and justice. Securing my arsenal of evidence was paramount. I methodically backed up 3 years of email correspondence, client contracts, and proprietary algorithms onto encrypted drives, distributing them across multiple secure locations to mitigate risk. Witness statements were obtained from 5 former colleagues, including Jennifer Lee and Thomas Brooks, whose corroborations verified instances of nepotism and misconduct. Simultaneously, I registered copyrights for my field ops system, establishing legal ownership predating Meridian's claims and insulating my intellectual property from appropriation. Contacting regulatory bodies overseeing employment practices and client management contracts was a calculated escalation, laying groundwork for official scrutiny. These measures transformed my knowledge and documentation from passive records into active defenses. Concurrently, I initiated confidential negotiations with a rival firm to secure a contingency plan, ensuring financial stability and preserving career trajectory should legal battles extend. This was not a retreat, but a strategic hedge, preserving options and leverage. Anticipating counter-litigation, I prepared defenses focused on client confidentiality and proprietary rights. The comprehensive nature of my preparations caught Chandler off guard. He had underestimated my capacity for strategic foresight. Every document, every witness, every legal registration was a calibrated move in a game where I intended to remain 10 steps ahead. The balance had shifted silently but irreversibly. For the first time since the campaign against me began, I felt the cold satisfaction of control returning, not through reaction, but through deliberate, unyielding strategy. The first step was gathering the real intelligence, mapping out every vulnerability, every dependency in Meridian's delicate operational web. I began with discreet conversations, reaching out to former clients whose trust I had cultivated over years. Each call was carefully scripted. Transparency was essential to maintain credibility, but I also had to plant the seed of possibility. There have been significant changes at Meridian. My role has shifted, I would say, voice steady, but neutral. I gauged reactions without pressing. Some hesitated, others were receptive, offering subtle hints they might consider following me if I left. Their responses were data points, valuable, yet cautious. Simultaneously, I constructed an inventory of dependencies, contracts with non-transferable clauses, software licenses tied directly to my proprietary field ops system, and client relationships so personalized they couldn't be easily reassigned. This catalog was exhaustive, down to the minutiae of billing cycles and operational handoffs. Each piece of information was documented meticulously, cross-referenced with legal standards. I engaged Mark Reynolds, my trusted employment lawyer, to review these details, his expertise translating corporate jargon into actionable leverage. "This is a strong position, Adam," he confirmed during a brief call. "You have the foundation to initiate your own consultancy without immediate legal entanglements." Drafting the contractual framework for my new consultancy was next. The entity had to be bulletproof, designed to protect intellectual property rights, ensure smooth client transitions, and withstand any retaliatory claims from Meridian. I spent nights reviewing clauses, adjusting language to preempt potential disputes. Legal notices to Meridian were prepared but held back, a strategic reserve for when the moment demanded. Every communication was logged, stored with encrypted backups. Outside the battlefield, I maintained a calm facade. At work, I continued fulfilling routine obligations with clinical precision, projecting compliance while positioning every element for a controlled confrontation. Chandler remained oblivious, confident in his dominance. His over-reliance on nepotism blinded him to the undercurrents shifting beneath Meridian's surface. I noted his complacency carefully. He underestimated the depth of my preparation and the loyalty still intact among key clients. Maintaining patience was critical. A premature move could unravel months of groundwork. I reminded myself daily, this was a strategic game of patience and control, where timing and precision would dictate success. No emotional outburst, no impulsive decisions, just steady, calculated positioning, quietly consolidating strength before the storm broke. In the days leading up to the decisive moment, I turned inward for final validation, a comprehensive audit of every gathered document, every legal opinion, every client correspondence consumed my waking hours. The integrity of my case had to be impeccable. I cross-checked every email for inconsistencies, every contract clause for loopholes. My home office became a war room, walls lined with printed evidence and timelines. Sarah observed the transformation with quiet support, her presence a steady anchor in the escalating tension. Precision and restraint, I emphasized during one late-night discussion. We cannot afford mistakes. We agreed on an aligned timeline. Formal notifications to Meridian and clients would be synchronized with the upcoming quarterly board meeting. This would maximize impact, forcing accountability in a public forum. My legal team was on standby, ready to act the moment I gave the signal. Despite the mounting pressure, I maintained a composed exterior, projecting the calm of a man in control. At Meridian, routine continued as usual. No one suspected the impending upheaval. This calm before the storm was deceptive, a strategic pause that masked the complexity of preparations unfolding behind closed doors. I rehearsed every step mentally, ensuring that when the time came, execution would be flawless. Then came the twist. Unexpected contact from Thomas Brooks, a former operations analyst with intimate knowledge of Meridian's internal workings, altered the entire landscape. Thomas reached out under strict confidentiality, his tone urgent but measured. "Adam, you need to see this," he said, forwarding internal memos and financial documents that confirmed something far worse than nepotism: fraud. Chandler had manipulated client billing records to siphon company funds into a private account. The evidence was irrefutable: multiple transactions, forged approvals, and collusion with Rachel Williams. This wasn't just corporate mismanagement, it was criminal corruption. Thomas's disclosure included corroborating witness statements and detailed timelines. The memos revealed a systematic scheme spanning months, designed to conceal financial diversion under the guise of operational expenses. I absorbed the implications with clinical detachment. This new information transformed my case from a civil employment dispute into a criminal investigation. The legal gravity increased exponentially. I immediately informed Mark Reynolds, who confirmed that regulatory authorities and law enforcement would now have jurisdiction. "This gives you leverage beyond anything you imagined," he said. "You can bring real pressure to bear on Meridian's leadership." Integrating this explosive evidence into my dossier sharpened my strategy. I revised timelines, accelerated planned actions, and informed close allies within my network. The added weight of criminal misconduct raised the stakes for Chandler significantly. He was no longer just a corporate adversary, but a potential subject of federal scrutiny. This revelation shifted the power dynamic decisively. My team and I prepared for an accelerated timeline, aware that the window for tactical advantage was narrowing. The cold calculation now included a new variable: regulatory investigations that could dismantle Meridian's upper management. The first moves of execution unfolded with measured precision. My legal counsel formally filed complaints with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Labor, triggering official probes into Meridian's financial fraud and management misconduct. The filings detailed Chandler's diversion scheme, nepotistic violations, and documented breaches of fiduciary duty. Parallel to regulatory action, I communicated directly with former clients, providing transparent briefings on the situation. "Your business continuity is my priority," I assured them in tailored communications, outlining plans to maintain seamless service through my new consultancy. Contractual clauses allowing client transitions were activated quietly but decisively. Meridian received formal breach of contract notices, outlining impending legal consequences should they attempt to obstruct client transfers. Chandler's attempts to contain the fallout were swift but ineffective. Internal chaos rippled through Meridian's leadership, but the exodus of clients had already begun. I maintained an unflappable demeanor throughout all communications, avoiding personal attacks and focusing strictly on documented facts. This professionalism reinforced my reputation as a principled expert, contrasting sharply with Meridian's unraveling image. The first phase of my strategic offensive had commenced, setting the stage for further decisive actions to come. The quarterly board meeting unfolded under a tense atmosphere I had meticulously engineered. The large conference room was packed with directors, senior executives, and external auditors, faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and subtle unease. The controlled lighting cast sharp angles on the polished mahogany table, where the evidence I'd gathered lay systematically arranged: contracts, transaction records, whistleblower affidavits, and client testimonials. As the projector illuminated the first slide, an internal memo revealing Chandler's direct involvement in the fraudulent billing scheme, I observed the room closely. Eyes shifted uneasily. A quiet ripple of murmurs betrayed the impact of each revelation. Chandler, seated to my left, radiated forced composure. His initial smirk faded as I methodically dismantled his narrative, presenting layered proof of his misconduct. Jennifer Lee's video testimony played clearly. Her calm voice detailed how Chandler repeatedly overruled operational protocols to favor his daughter's department, compromising service quality. Thomas Brooks's sworn statement followed, corroborating the financial irregularities. I watched Chandler's jaw tighten, the veneer of control cracking under the weight of irrefutable facts. When given the floor, his defense stumbled. Stammered denials and evasive responses only deepened suspicion. The media, previously tipped off by anonymous sources, converged outside, their presence palpable through the room's large windows. I was acutely aware that this was not just a corporate hearing. The incident had become a public spectacle. The board members, once hesitant, now leaned forward, their demeanor shifting from passive observation to active concern. I articulated a clear vision for Meridian's recovery: governance reforms, transparent client relations, and reinstatement of operational integrity. This was no longer about personal vendettas, but salvaging the company's future. The power dynamic had reversed. Chandler's resignation was no longer a question, but an inevitability. As the session adjourned, a subtle but undeniable shift had taken place. I stepped out into the corridor, sensing the quiet approval of colleagues and the weight of justice served, not through emotion, but through strategic precision and unassailable evidence. My voice, measured and deliberate, conveyed the calculated culmination of months of preparation. Meridian stability depends on truth and accountability, I stated plainly. No cheers, no dramatics, just the cold satisfaction of a professional victory achieved by methodical design, not impulsive reaction. In the aftermath, the repercussions were swift and merciless. Regulatory bodies descended on Meridian with sanctions that echoed the severity of Chandler's offenses. A $1.2 million fine, coupled with stringent governance reforms, mandated to prevent recurrence. Chandler's resignation was tendered quietly, but with unmistakable finality, his reputation irreparably damaged. Contracts once held steady, now unraveled as clients severed ties with Meridian in disbelief and frustration. The revenue decline was staggering, 65% wiped from the books within weeks, leaving operational chaos in its wake. Media outlets exploited the scandal mercilessly. Investigative reports, peppered with leaked internal emails and whistleblower interviews, exposed systemic nepotism and fraud at Meridian's highest levels. Industry peers distanced themselves with carefully measured statements, protecting their reputations from association. I monitored the fallout with detached satisfaction, acknowledging that professional justice had been enacted not by personal reckoning, but by exposing cold, verifiable facts. My focus shifted immediately. Consultancy expansion plans were quietly initiated, leveraging the trust I retained with key clients who sought stability amid Meridian's turmoil. Clients who had once wrestled with uncertainty now sought direct assurances. My early communications, drafted with precision, emphasized continuity and expertise. My priority remains your business's operational integrity, I assured them, reinforcing my commitment to their success, independent of Meridian's failures. The strategic dismantling of Chandler's network had destabilized not only his position, but the company's entire operational foundation. Yet amid the disruption, I found measured satisfaction in the demonstration that evidence-backed professionalism could outmaneuver nepotistic corruption. The system had reasserted itself, proving that patience, documentation, and strategic communication were more powerful than brute authority. In an increasingly desperate bid to regain control, Chandler attempted to negotiate directly with me. His initial offer, $500,000 to drop the legal proceedings, arrived cloaked in veiled threats and hollow promises. His approach was transparent. Buy silence. Salvage what remained of his reputation. I responded with unwavering refusal. Integrity is not for sale, I conveyed tersely. His attempts to intimidate me through anonymous leaks and baseless rumors fell flat. Every claim I countered with documented facts and unwavering client testimonies. His public apology, broadcast in an industry newsletter, reeked of insincerity, a calculated move to stem the hemorrhaging of trust rather than genuine remorse. The damage was done. Former colleagues I once regarded as adversaries cautiously reached out in private, some offering apologies for their earlier complicity or silence. Their voices revealed fractured loyalties and growing recognition of Chandler's ruinous impact. Yet attempts to rally support fizzled. The regulatory and legal pressure had created an isolating cage around Chandler's influence. Each failed maneuver only underscored the increasing gulf between us. While he flailed against mounting consequences, I remained unshaken, my posture firm and focused on rebuilding rather than retribution. The contrast was stark, my professional steadiness against his desperation. This final chapter in his playbook closed with no allies left to shield him, his fall complete within the system he once sought to manipulate. The calculated patience that had guided me through the conflict now guided me forward, free of distractions or lingering doubts. The launch of Greenfield Consulting marked the tangible beginning of a new chapter. With 38 former Meridian clients transferring their contracts, the portfolio I managed represented $1.6 million in annual revenue, an 11% increase over what I had controlled previously. The legal settlement secured $1.4 million in compensation and, crucially, the intellectual property rights to my proprietary field ops system. This combination of financial restitution and operational autonomy symbolized a clean break from the toxic environment I'd dismantled. Recognition within the industry followed, not as a personal triumph, but as a testament to principled strategic navigation of a complex conflict. Larger clients and investors took notice, intrigued by the professional rigor underscoring my approach. At home, Sarah's quiet pride grounded me. Our conversations, stripped of drama, focused on measured progress and the restoration of balance. Documentation and patience, I reflected aloud one evening, are the ultimate assets in any professional battle. The lessons were hard-earned but invaluable. Chandler's career lay in ruins. Regulatory boards barred him from leadership positions pending further investigation, his name synonymous with failed nepotism and corruption. I neither celebrated nor gloat. Victory for me was practical and systemic, a restoration of fairness and competence within an industry I valued. The path forward was clear, shaped not by revenge but by the cold logic of preparation, evidence and strategic patience. This was my domain now, a place where merit prevailed over manipulation and integrity was the currency of true power.